Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Subconscious Medicine. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Okay. Well, after a little catch up last episode, I wanted to do quick little chat about the new year, New Year's resolutions, all of those things, sort of like my thoughts on it, and then my own plans for the new year. Um, I did just want to add a quick note at the top of this video. We talked about this extensively last episode, but a lot of communities in and around Los Angeles are still struggling. So if you want to get involved and want to donate, volunteer, or just share, spread the word, please don't hesitate to do so. And you can find a bunch of resources about that on Subconscious Medicine Instagram as well as in the description box below. Thank you guys. And yeah, let's dive in. I feel like there's been a shift in the last few years from these really rigid New Year's resolutions to people kind of defying that completely and being like, oh, these are stupid, and rejecting this whole new year, new me type of thing. I kind of find myself somewhere in the middle. I think that goals are really, really important in every aspect of life. And something about this new year creates a sense of newness and a blank slate that makes establishing goals a lot easier and more digestible for people to sort of practice. I think that we need to be constantly setting new goals as we achieve them or as they become impractical or as our priorities and our sort of vision for our future changes. And a lot of times setting goals can be really hard and we don't really get a ton of practice with it unless we're really intentional about it. So I think that the start of a new year can be a great way to practice that skill. So, yeah, I find myself somewhere in the middle. I do think that the rigidness of timelines and things of that sort that we've steered away from, I think that that's we're moving in a better direction because I think that rigidity and those really uniformed goals can be really impractical and misleading, and sometimes they can lead to resentment buildup and feeling like a failure if we don't achieve them and so on and so forth. And none of that is the goal of setting goals, right? The whole point is to make them achievable and to practice routines that are going to contribute to our growth. So I think that I would identify myself somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. I do use the beginning of a new year as an opportunity to look towards the future, evaluate where I am, and what changes have to be made to get me to where I want to be. But at the same time, I really try to not set super specific and rigid expectations for myself that I know are going to be so daunting that they're likely not going to be achieved. So that's kind of where I stand. I really try to use my lived experience to inform the way that I change things about my daily routine, um, to contribute to a more fruitful future. And I think that that's been really successful. I've tried to do that probably the last 2 years now. And again, not just around New Year's, but throughout the year when I'm establishing new goals for myself, when I'm experiencing change, or so on and so forth. And I find that that's a much more digestible task for me to tackle than like completely changing my whole life at the top of a new year. So, yes, something else I wanted to talk about is I've tried to pick a word for each year, a word that I feel encapsulates all of my goals. So I want to start with that to provide some context to some of my goals. And, you know, trying to pick a singular word is really complicated. I'm not sure that this is the best word maybe if you guys have some ideas, please leave them alone, or leave them alone. My goodness, leave them down below is what I meant to say. Like once you hear what some of my goals are, and maybe you can better articulate. The word that stands out to me this year is simplicity. I feel like I live a pretty fast paced life. I think that's sort of innate in like that college lifestyle. But I'm someone who is extremely productive and like fast going, and I don't like taking time to myself or slowing down necessarily. Even like sitting down to record these, as much as I love it, sometimes I get a little antsy or anxious and I have to like pause recording in the middle to like get up and do something just to feel productive. Um and I have found that that fast-paced nature is a lot of times what keeps me sane and grounded. It's when I sit in my own thoughts that those anxious feelings start to come up, and I am really hoping that in this year I can sort of create a railroad for my actions and my goals. I don't like feeling lost or disconnected from myself or feeling disingenuous. And I think that the reason I get into that headspace is because I make simple things a lot more complicated than they have to be. Um, and that creates dread and feelings of failure, and that sort of that what if perspective, like what if this happened, what if I fail at this, so on and so forth. And I'm hoping to take a little bit more of a simple approach to life. um as cliche as it sounds, we've got one chance, and I really 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 do not want to look back on my life in old age and just like kick myself for making things 10 times more complicated than they ever needed to be. And so I think that trying to adopt a level of simplicity that still, accentuates the complexities of life, but also recognizes that, we have a lot more in common than we think we do. And we're all trying to achieve the same goals to some extent. Like, we all want to be successful. We all, want to some extent to make money and so on and so forth, to help people, to be a good partner, to be a good friend, to be a good daughter or son. And I think that if I'm develop the ability to ground myself in that word of simplicity in moments that seem really overwhelming, that I'll be able to better like ground myself and calm myself down. So that's something I kind of want to channel this year. Again, I try to create my goals first and then think of a word that encapsulates them all. And so that's what came to mind. Again, there's a lot of other words that I think could also articulate that sort of mindset. But I'm also interested to hear what your word of 2025 is. I think it's really interesting. And I think telling someone that and then having them try to like think about, like, someone that knows you well, but having them try to like think about what goals maybe were behind that decision could be really telling and maybe help you, decipher whether or not that word is saying what it needs to say for you specifically. So, yeah, that's a little bit of context. But now I want to talk about like what I'm prioritizing this year, what I'm going to practice this year. Again, I see these as goals. I don't really see them as resolutions because many of these things I'm already doing, but I'm either not doing them as much as I want to, or I'm doing them more than I would like to. Um, and so, yeah, they're not completely absent most of the time. They're just like, I want these things to be more important, like, and amplified in my life, or reduced and to make more time for the things that I do care about. So, I don't love the term resolutions, but if the term resolutions resonates with you, then that's totally fine. Stick with that. You can sort of interpret these as resolutions if that makes more sense for you, but I see them more as like items that I'm prioritizing or things that I'm practicing and trying to implement into like my regular routine and so on. So I wanted to start it off with health and fitness because I know that this comes up on, it seems like everyone's New Year's resolution list or their vision board or whatever. Um, I don't hate that. Like, I feel like there's a lot of hate around that, and people have tried to encourage like everyday people to stop making resolutions about fitness, and they're like, "Oh, you won't stick to them," whatever. I feel like that's sending the wrong message. I think if fitness and having an active lifestyle and eating a particular diet or eating whole foods or whatever is important to you, and reminding yourself of that at the top of a year is what you need, then I think that's totally fine. Something I've learned is that in order to maintain those goals is they cannot be so specific, rather, and they can't be super rigid. I've made those in the past and they never work out. But having a more holistic view of health and wellness is what's really helped me maintain that lifestyle. So just incorporating movement into every day. um, Eating full whole foods is something I remind myself of. And yeah, I think my fitness sort of ebbs and flows as the semester gets busy or as I get into a routine or get out of a good routine and so on and so forth. So I think that it's not no testament to like how I maintained fitness this past year in 2024, but rather that I just want to continue to prioritize that. I view it as something that's really important. I am able bodied, and that is a privilege, and I don't want to take that for granted. So finding types of movements that I enjoy that make me feel good and energized is really important. Something I do want to try this year, I guess this is a little bit more specific. I want to try like actual workout classes. I've always been really intimidated by them because I'm the type of person who like I just put in my headphones, listen to music and kind of zone out. Like that's what I do when I go for a run or when I'm going to the gym or whatever. I've never been in that like community space with the exception of sports. And obviously, I like played a team sport, played softball, so we were always together. We did have to like work out together. Did a lot of like hit based workouts as a team and like with trainers and stuff, and that was great. I loved it. And in this last year I've really missed being an athlete. I guess to some extent, like if you work out regularly you are in essence an athlete, but I miss the competitive aspects of sports. And so something I've thought a lot about is doing like actual workout classes. Something that's stopped me from doing this is just the price. They're so unbelievably expensive, but I'm thinking like even if I work in one a week, then it gives me something to look forward to. Maybe it can sort of channel that inner competitiveness, and that like athlete mindset, and it just gets me trying new types of movement. So that is something I want to try. I've thought a little bit about which workout classes specifically I want to try. The one that I keep thinking about is F45. I've heard amazing things, and there's one really close to me, so I think that that's going to be the winner. But I'll let you know. I do really want to try it out, though. The only other one that stands out is Orange Theory. That one, a little intimidating. I think we should start with F45. Not that F45 is easy, but like I feel like I know a little bit more about F45, so it seems easier for me to like start with that and then maybe try Orange Theory. I know like bar and Pilates and all those things are really popular right now. That's just not my type of workout, as evidenced by saying I want to try F45 and Orange Theory. I like a little bit more fast pace. Um, I think Pilates and those things are great. That's just like not my type of workout. You know what? Maybe I should try it. Maybe I would like it, but it doesn't seem intriguing to me. But yeah, who knows? So that's sort of at where I'm. Oh my goodness, that's sort of where I'm at with health and wellness. Um, but yeah, I don't I don't like the overly rigid goals about fitness. I think that that can be really toxic, and kind of just like, I don't know. I feel like it never works. It always, if anything, works in the opposite direction. Like you get further away from obtaining those goals because it just makes it such a daunting experience. And that's not something that the word simplicity channels. So overall, prioritizing my health and wellness. Next is staying organized. Now, if you know me, you're probably thinking, Ella, you are like unbelievably organized. And I am physically. Like my physical space is extremely organized. I'm looking at my closet right now, very organized. My bed is currently made, even though I'm laying in it. Like I'm objectively a very organized person. I live and die by my calendar. I have a digital and a physical one. Everything goes in both. Like I understand that it seems that I'm very organized. However, my physical space is extremely organized, but my mind is not. Mentally, I have a really, really hard time focusing because my mind is so disorganized. I oftentimes find myself having conversations with people and completely like disassociating and having like I'm watching their mouths move. I have no idea what they're talking about because I'm thinking about something entirely different. And I really hate that. I want to be more present. I want to be more in the moment, and more like a more intentional listener. And I think that in order to do that, I need to work on organizing my mind, work on sort of pressing the off button, as I navigate the world and enter and exit different situations. And I know this is going to be so much easier said than done, but I do want to like find a way to compartmentalize my thoughts, and yeah, just organize them. I think that it will make me a better friend. It will make me a better listener, a better student, and just help or strengthen rather my ability to focus in the present. And that's something that means a lot to me. I always recognize when other people are really present. Like that's a compliment I love being able to give someone is like, wow, you're very intentional listener. You're so attentive to, this work, and I can tell that your ability to maintain focus is really strong here, especially like in the workplace or in a classroom. I feel like that's a really good compliment to receive. And I think because it's a weakness of mine, I'm very in tune to when I think the people around me are good at it. And so I always want to call them out on it because I think that that's a really good compliment to receive. So that's something that I want to work on. I think that having conversations about that with people that I think do it well is going to be really important for me to sort of shift, and grow in that area. But yeah, I want to be an intentional listener, and I think that in order to do that, I sort of need to work on organizing my mind. You would think that if my physical space is organized, people always say that like your physical space is a reflection of your mind or something, or maybe the other way around. I don't know. There's a saying about that. I really don't feel like that's true for me. Again, my physical space is incredibly organized, but my mind is not. Um, Even just listening to myself talk about this now, I feel like I'm talking really fast. Am I? I don't even know. But it's because I'm already thinking about the next goal that I'm going to talk about. Like, I hate that. I hate that I am not focused on the conversation I'm having. There's no one around me, there's no distraction, and yet somehow I'm like, my mind is moving a mile a minute and it's on to the next thing. So, yes, as evidenced by that, this is clearly something I need to work on. Um, so I'm really going to try to prioritize this year. This is not something I've identified as a goal in the past. This is something kind of new. So we'll see, but I'm going to try my best. Also give myself grace, but I'm going to try my best. Okay, the next one is investing in friendships. Um, I've talked about this a bit before, but I'm like a hyper independent person. There is nothing that I do that I feel like I can't do alone. There's certainly things that I would prefer to do with other people, but if I want to do something, I'm going to do it, even if it means doing it alone. And that is something like a skill that I value in myself. However, I think that because I know that about myself, I do not reach out to people when I feel like they might want to participate, or even if they might want to participate, because I'm like, oh, I could just do this on my own. I don't want to bother people, whatever. Um, so yeah, I'm a, I'm quite a introvert. I recharge by alone time. I enjoy my alone time a lot. And I think it's important that I maintain a little bit of that, but I also think that in this season of my life, I would really benefit from being a little bit more sociable and investing in, like really carving out time for friends, and being more intentional about that, whether that mean going out to dinner or taking like, reserving a room in the library and doing a study sesh, whatever it is, but investing time in relationships and in people that I care about, I think is really, really important. And I do think I need to do a better job at that. I, oftentimes can get caught up in the chaos of life and school and so on. And I really value people in my life who I think are good friends. And I want to be able to reciprocate and be a good friend back. And, I want people to talk about me like, oh yeah, Ella is someone who really cares about this relationship and makes time for me and our relationship, and fosters new conversation and growth in our relationship with one another or our friendship with one another. So investing in friendships is something that I really want to prioritize this year. With that, I guess also goes like removing myself from friendships that no longer serve me. I'm in this place of like recognition that you are just not going to be friends with the same people all your life, and people are going to, undergo new experiences and they're going to change, as are you. Like, if you are the same person that you were at 15, yikes. I don't think any of us should, like always be the same. And so with that, you have to recognize that people that you once loved, maybe you still do love, but they don't serve you. They don't meet your needs. They don't share the same qualities or interests that brought you to them in the first place. And so maybe they served their purpose, but maybe their chapter's over. And it's okay to sort of weed out those relationships that no longer serve you as you continue to grow and as you continue to find new people who do meet those needs and do meet those expectations. So yeah, I want to be less fearful of that. And like, I guess overarching goal is just like prioritizing myself and recognizing what I need and finding the people who have those innate qualities about them. Um, but yes, I need to invest more time in my friendships, and that's something I'm hoping to do in the new year. The next goal is be creative. I'm a very analytical thinker. I'm very much a perfectionist, and I think that in some instances, those characteristics shine and they make me a good team member or a good asset to, a classroom or to a workspace. But I think in other situations, it sort of limits my creative juices and my ability to think creatively. And that's something that I want to engage in more, is that more flexible, creative mindset. I guess in essence, this podcast was my first attempt at that in 2024. This is unlike anything that I've ever done, and it sparks a lot of creativity in my life in terms of planning and actuating, like actually filming the podcast, editing, all the graphics on Instagram or the thumbnail or things like that. It does certainly channel a level of creativity that has been really exciting, and I really enjoy the lack of rigidity and the lack of perfectionism and just kind of being able to, you know, like pull up my phone and talk off the cuff. I really like that. And I kind of think that I've already seen growth in that. And so I'm hoping to channel creativity in different avenues of life. I'm not really quite sure what this looks like for me yet. I haven't necessarily thought about it um, like that in depth, but I'm this is going to be a year full of a lot of change for me. Like, I'm graduating college and I'm moving on to a new step. And so I'm hoping that with that change comes the ability to practice creativity, and implement it into my everyday. So, yeah, I'm hoping to be more creative this year. The next thing is something that I want to practice. I guess prioritize it as well, but I really want to practice patience this year. I wouldn't describe myself as either patient or not patient. I really think it depends on the context. I want to work with children, and I think when I work with youth, like I'm thinking back to this past summer, I exhibited more patience than I think most people would be able to. But then there are other instances where I have like zero patience, like I have zero patience for bad drivers. So when I'm driving and like someone cuts me off or someone doesn't use their blinker, it drives me crazy. And, in those moments, often someone in the passenger seat is like, just be patient or, whatever. That's just one like silly example. Obviously, there are more serious ones, but like, or group projects is a good example. I have very minimal patience for working in groups because I just prefer to do it on my own. Um, and so in those moments, I really, really, really want to be more intentional about practicing patience. It's really important that we work well with other people. You're going to have to do it what, no matter what your future looks like. You're always going to need to interact and network and talk to other people, and especially me, like I'm hopefully entering a career in like social services, and so I'm going to have to work with people who think differently than me, and I think it's really important that um, I am someone who's patient and I'm able to practice that in any situation that needs it. So I want to be more intentional about practicing patience, specifically in the context that I currently struggle with it in. I think that in times we can all be more patient. It's really hard. People throw it around like it's an easy skill, and I think at times it can be really struggling. So I encourage you, if you find yourself being impatient in any situation, whether silly or like really serious, I encourage you to prioritize that. Even if that at first that just looks like recognizing it, like calling out yourself in moments where you're being impatient, so that you can see it as like an outsider. I think that's a great first step. That's sort of where I'm at right now. Is as I'm acting impatiently, being like, hold on, take a step back. What would, if you heard someone else saying these things, or if you heard someone else, saw someone else acting in this way, would you deem them a patient person? No. Okay. So, like, how can we shift? How can we be flexible? How can we practice patience in this moment and take up a new perspective? So, that's really something that I want to prioritize this year as well. The next is travel. This year in 2024, I got the opportunity to travel to some new places, and those by far, when I think about like my year in recap, those moments stand out the most. I love experiencing new cities, new cultures, new people, and as I mentioned, this year is met with a lot of change, which also means like periods of free time, like that gap between undergrad and graduate school, though probably working and doing whatever, will probably be met with a little bit of free time. And I really just want to harness that time and use it as an opportunity to see the world. This past summer, I traveled a ton on weekends, just like literally just took weekend trips. During Monday through Friday, I was taking classes and working, so couldn't leave obviously, but yet I still went to New Orleans, I went to Providence, Rhode Island, I went home for one weekend. Like, there's a way to fit it in. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I just really want to continue to travel. I know it's, again, easier said than done. Like, traveling costs money, it costs time, it costs like it requires a lot of effort and planning. But I'm really hopeful that I can travel a little bit. I'm hoping to go on a spring break trip somewhere. and then go on kind of a bigger trip once I graduate. So we'll see if any of that happens. But I'm kind of hoping for that. So yeah, we shall see. But I just think traveling is so important. It makes us more knowledgeable and interesting people, and I really want to enjoy that while I'm young and it's easy to travel, or easier, I suppose. So hoping to check off a few new places, travel to some places that I already know and love this year, and really just like expand my worldview. So, yeah. The next, I'm not going to harp on too much because I feel like I talk about this all the time, but it's saving money. Again, I don't see my goals as things that I'm not already doing, so I feel like I'm already doing a fairly good job at this. So, this is something I just want to continue into the new year. I've recently made some financial decisions um, to help me save money and like opened some new like bank accounts and things. And so it's kind of exciting, feeling very adult. Don't really know what I'm doing. So thank you, Jeffrey. Jeffrey is my father. Thank you, Jeffrey, for explaining all of it to me. I still don't totally understand it, but in Jeffrey we trust. So yeah, just continuing to save money so that these other goals are more practical, like taking workout classes, like traveling, investing in friendships, like that costs money, right? So doing something to make these goals easier, I think is really important, and obviously finances play a role. The next is a big one. This one's probably the most daunting, and that is saying no. I am someone who is definitely a yes man. I don't always prioritize my own needs in situations, and I think that oftentimes it leads to me sort of being like taken advantage of in friendships or in relationships with people, and I need to do better at protecting my own peace and saying no. If I care at all about you and you ask me for literally the smallest favor, I will absolutely, at the drop of my hat, like do anything that you ask. And I think a lot of times that's mistaken as a really good quality. Like people admire that about me or about other people. I think that's kind of like a huge misunderstanding. I think that obviously at times like it is nice that you're helpful, but I think it does me a much bigger disservice than anything because it builds a sort of safety net, and like once you do it over and over enough, people just know that you're going to say yes. They get used to you saying yes, and that's where like the balance starts to tip a little bit, and all of a sudden you're investing way more than other people. So I want to do better at just protecting my own peace. It doesn't mean saying no just for the sake of saying no, but it does mean that like in instances where I don't want to participate in something, or I don't really have time to do something, I could probably make time, but it's not that important to me. Just like being true to myself and saying no instead of forcing myself to change my own schedule, my own like shift my own priorities to meet your needs and to meet your expectations. That's not healthy, that's not sustainable, and I think that that leads to a lot of my own resentment in relationships. And resentment is not like a comfortable feeling. It's not something that I want to be experiencing on the regular, and so I really just think I need to practice saying no. I think with that is like trusting my own mind and not like letting gaslight is like a really aggressive term here, but like not letting other people convince me that my priorities are different than what they are. Does that make sense? So like really only I know my true priorities and what's important to me and what I value. And the fact that that doesn't necessarily align with other people is not my fault, and it's not a problem. Even like my best friends, like our values do not have to be identical. Obviously, there's likely some overlap, and that's what brings us together. But in any given day when they're making a decision that I just don't agree with or I don't want to participate in or so on, I really need to just practice saying no and prioritizing myself. I think that the 20s is like a great time to do that. And I really want to work on my self growth this year, and yeah, just building an identity for myself that I feel like is really true to the fundamental values that I hold and making those visible to people too. Like, we as a society, I don't feel like talk openly about our values because we're like fearful of being criticized, and though that's completely understandable, I think that your values should be visible. Like, people should know, or at least people that are close with you should be able to tell what it is that's important to you, and if they can't tell, then are you really like making steps to prioritize those things in your life? Probably not, because they would see those steps. Like, they would recognize those behaviors and be able to identify the value that lies underneath them. So if they can't see those things in you, then you're probably not prioritizing them as much as you need to, right? Like, as a simple example, let's say I prioritize health and wellness, but I like eat like objectively not healthy, and I don't practice movement every day or most days or some days, then any outsider would be like, okay, well, fitness and wellness probably isn't a priority then, right? Because what are you doing in your daily life to prioritize those things? Nothing. Like, if anything, you might be doing the opposite. So I think to a certain extent, our values should be visible to other people based on our own behavior. And when there's not, that creates that sort of disconnect that can create issues. So, really just work on making my values visible and prioritizing myself, even if that means saying no, which is hard. I'm going to need a lot of people to hold me to that. So, yeah, but it is something I'm going to practice. Next, something I want to prioritize is podcast. I have a lot of fun doing this. As I said, this is an opportunity for me to be creative and channel that like part of my brain, and it challenges me in ways that I've never been challenged before. Obviously school is challenging. Obviously running can be or like other things that I do are challenging, saving money, but this challenges me in very unique ways in terms of planning and actually talking, and I really enjoy that like part of my brain being scratched. So I really want to prioritize this podcast. It's incredibly difficult to carve out time for this. Um and I know it's possible. I know I can do it if I try hard enough, but at times, there's just other things that are more important, but I do want to prioritize this. That doesn't necessarily mean posting a podcast every single weekend. Like, again, those really rigid goals for the new year are not something that I want to adopt. Like, I want this to be flexible. It's supposed to be creative. It's supposed to be mine. It's supposed to be what I want to make out of it. And so putting those really rigid timelines is probably not going to lead to much success. But I just want to finish 2025 knowing that I put effort into this. I tried to make this community grow no matter what it looks like at December 2025. I want to know that I made time for it and that I prioritize this because it is a great way for me to be creative. So, hoping to invest more time, or no, not hoping, I am going to invest more time and prioritize this podcast in the new year. Okay, the last one is something that I heard recently. It's inspired by Gretchen Garrity, if you guys know her. She's a YouTuber, influencer, like posts on all the things. I have been watching her for literally ever. Just saying, way like she had maybe 1,000 subscribers when I started watching her. Been watching her for years, love her content. She also, shout out, has grown so much. That's a whole nother story. But anyways, um, she recently posted a video. She talked a little bit about her 2025 goals, and one of them really like resonated with me. Probably not in the way that she intended for it, like to apply it to her own life, but it really resonated with me. So I wanted to share. She said she wants to create as much as she consumes. Now, she's a big YouTuber. I don't know how many subscribers she has. I would guess over 1 million, I think. I don't know. I literally have no idea. But so for her that means a little something different. Probably she was talking about it specifically in the context of like social media product, so like YouTube videos, Instagram posts, etc. That's not necessarily what it's going to look like for me, but I think that the underlying idea of creating and consuming at equal levels is really interesting. I certainly consume more than I create. Um, for instance, on social media, like I'm always listening to a podcast. Love, love, love podcasts. Or I'm watching a YouTube video or I'm scrolling through Instagram, whatever. I obviously don't create as much as that. If you follow me on my personal Instagram, you know I very rarely post. And even on the subconscious medicine Instagram, not posting a ton. These come out max once a week, and even that, not really. So yeah, it's not gonna look like that in the context of social media. However, I think that there are other ways to create in creative ways. So I do want to balance that playing field of how much I consume and I create, because I think it's sort of dangerous to consume all of this content and then to not channel your own creativity in any way. Um, I think that for me, creating can also be in the context of opportunities for people. So, for instance, like when we're talking about school, I'm on the e-board of a few clubs. I work on campus at our volunteer center where my job is literally to create events, like quite literally called the director of events at and then the place that I work. So I'm constantly challenged with the task of creating opportunities for our students, and that's something I really enjoy doing. So I really want to channel that this year. And for me, creating is this podcast. It's also posting on my personal Instagram, but it can also be creating opportunities for students to volunteer or to learn more about psychology or mental health or whatever, all of the groups that I participate in. But I really want to share that with other people and create opportunities for students. Um, this is kind of like that senior mindset, but I really want to leave this place better than I found it. And UT has brought me some incredible experiences and relationships and so on. And I just hope that for other people. So I really want to create opportunities, for the people behind me, uh, in the same way that I consume content on social media or other outlets, and it makes me feel inspired, or it makes me feel heard, or it makes me feel loved or valued. I know that if it reaches the right audience, that people will feel that from me. Like, we all at the end of the day are just people trying our best. So I just hope that my ability to create in whatever context that is, that it resonates with someone and that someone feels connected to it somehow. So, shout out to Gretchen again. Create as much as you consume. I think that that's a really important lesson to live by. So, I encourage you to think about that in your own way, in your own life, rather. Think about ways that you can create and channel that creative energy, to sort of balance out the amount that you consume and create. And let me know, what does that look like for you? In what ways are you planning on being creative in the new year? Okay, well, that wraps up my 2025 goals and priorities. Again, don't love the word resolutions. That just feels daunting to me, but I look at more as like what I'm prioritizing, what I'm practicing. So, yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot more that I'm missing. This was just like a quick list that I came up with, but I think the fact that they came to mind first also says a lot. So, yeah, what are you guys prioritizing in the new year? I'd love to hear if you want to leave it down below. Um, but yeah, I hope you guys have a great week. Thank you so much for listening, and bye, guys.